Thank you. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Ian Kahn. Ian is a 3-time TEDx speaker, a technology futurist, and author of several books, including his latest book, Meaningful Conversations, Value Creation in the Era of Digital Disruption. A highly active voice in the technology space, Ian's work spans across private and public organizations, where his greatest mission is to create an understanding of how value creation through technology is a key factor for our success at every front. So please, with a nice big round of applause, join me in welcoming Ian Kahn.
Imagine a time when people and technology come together and create beautiful outcomes. Here at BOMA, we're talking about creating beautiful spaces, whether it's commercial or anything else. My name is Ian Kahn, and I'm here to tell you about some very important developments in the industry, something that every one of you is involved in. And it's my pleasure to be here to be the bearer of good news. Now, if we haven't seen this before, we are today in what is called the Fourth Industrial Revolution. The Fourth Industrial Revolution, as you can imagine, came from the first, second, and third. The first one being the invention of the steam engine, which was, hundreds of years ago. And at that time, that changed the outcome of the world, because now you had an automation in place. You had something in place that would change how work was done. We then had electricity that again took humanity to a different level in terms of production, in terms of being able to do more with what we have and being able to do things in a better way. In the 60s, we had the era of automation, when factory lines were able to produce equipment, goods, and we were able to have the aspect of more volume and more value to the market. In today's time and age, we are at a place where systems, technology, and people are coming together in what is called the cyber-physical era. Today, machines, people, technology, and as we saw in some of the keynotes before, everything is coming together not to do things in a bigger way, or not to do things in a greater or a faster way, but to create more value. So that's very important. Now, technology transformation is really, what we're talking about here. And in the commercial real estate industry, whether it's the residential real estate, think about your lives. Your lives touch so many different aspects. You're talking about real estate. You're talking about homes, offices, workplaces, transportation, many, many aspects that we all touch as consumers and as people. And technology across the board makes things better, because it changes the way processes work, it changes the way the results are generated, and it makes things faster as well. We have faster time to market. Our buildings construction takes less amount of time, and there's significantly more and faster time to value. So value is really, really my core message. I see everything as value, and again, we're also becoming more efficient. We can do more with less resources, and we have results and execution in a much more efficient way. And those are really the real transformation that technology brings. Now, the transformation that we're seeing through technology today hasn't just happened yesterday. This is not 2 years old, but the internet it's about 20 years old now. And, we saw the internet being commercialized 20 years ago, so it's been 2 decades, and there's nothing new. So we might be a little bit behind in catching up on those things, and those technologies might have taken a little bit more time to come to fruition, but the time is now. And digital technologies are changing everything that we do, from our cell phones to controlling our homes, to our Nest thermostat, to watching our kids in a daycare on our cell phones to see how they're doing through the cameras they provide. So the impact of technology is prevalent everywhere. And this trend will continue to shape our lives. It will continue to change the way we live, we consume services, solutions, And really, it will continue to shape the way we design things and the way we think. So there's no going back. It was just a one-way ticket we got. If you know a little bit about smart cities, really, smart cities is about an environment that is facilitated by technology in different aspects. You're in Nashville today, and imagine that Nashville was the futuristic city of tomorrow, where everything was connected to the internet. Everything was connected somehow to another system that would make our lives easy. I'm not sure if you can see this really clear, but in a typical smart city, we're talking about automation of traffic. If you have connected cars, how will those connected cars drive on the roads that they will need to move on? What about the buildings? What about the HVAC system in buildings? What about elevators within buildings? And I'm not talking commercial or residential. And there's so much transformation that is taking place that smart cities of tomorrow will be living and breathing organisms. And this is going to happen for sure. So we need to catch up real quick on this and learn what we need to learn in order to be part of the smart cities of tomorrow. You must have heard about the recent news where Amazon is going to acquire Whole Foods, and a technology company is now acquiring a grocery store chain and creating transformation in a completely different way. Now, Amazon, we know, is a technology leader. They've got so many different things going on. It's an amazing provider of not just e-commerce, or it's not just the world's greatest and largest bookstore, but they're also a facilitator of positive outcomes. And as we will see in our panel later, there's a lot more transformation that potentially is going to come through that acquisition. But this is what we're talking about in a smart city. In a smart city, grocery stores are connected to people. People are connected to their cars. Cars are connected to elevators. There's general connectivity. The idea of connectivity prevails over anything. Analysts typically talk about a hype cycle. And a hype cycle is something that tells us where the current state of a specific technology is. This specific hype cycle is produced by Gartner, and they're a leading analyst firm, and it's a couple of years old. It's the smart city hype cycle that tells us where are smart cities today with respect to technologies that are going to be an integral part of it. And if you can look at the slide, the Internet of Things is just beginning to become more popular. And there's many more technologies up here, artificial intelligence, connected cars, healthcare. The idea here is that technology follows a trend. Technology always follows a trend from being conceived to being utilized commercially so that it's full-blown commercial and we use it. So we've got to learn these ideas and concepts about technology because we all need to be technologists at the end of the day, because technology is such a huge part of our lives. I encourage you to look this up and check out some of the other technologies that are part of the smart city hype cycle, and it'll help you understand what is coming up tomorrow in the era of smart cities that'll help me understand what technologies will have the maximum impact. And then go a level further and think about how can you be part of that? How can you be part of that conversation? I'm going to talk to you about three main technologies very, very shortly as a very quick overview so that we are all on the same page and we understand the technologies that will play a dramatic part in our lives tomorrow, starting with the Internet of Things. Now, quite simply put, the Internet of Things really is anything that is connected to the Internet can be classified as the Internet of Things. Now, I have a wearable on my hand. It's an activity tracker that tells me how many steps have I taken, how many, what's my heart rate. Does anybody else wear this here in the audience? Could you raise your hand? Oh, I got plenty of people. All right. So all of you guys are connected to the Internet of Things. Now, for those of you who are not wearing these devices, perhaps you have a Nest thermostat at home. Perhaps you all have cell phones. Well, you all are connected to the Internet of Things. And the cell phones of today are not just cell phones. I believe they are phones at the end, but they are these smart devices that give us so many different features and functionality that there's over 1 million apps in a typical app store, whether it's Android or the iPhone. So going back, the Internet of Things connects devices to the Internet so that we can get useful information from those devices and use that information to make decisions. It's not only being connected that brings value, but the information and the data that we get from these devices that provides us the insights to be able to take an action. An example, this tells me how I'm doing health-wise so that I can maybe run a couple of miles if I'm short on my steps because I want the best of health for myself. So please think about the outcome of technology rather than the technology itself. Now, the Internet of Things is connecting people, connecting devices, connecting everybody to everything anywhere. So those are all the points we think about when we talk about the Internet of Things. But it's very simple to talk about it in a slide, and it's much more complex when you talk about how devices will connect and how they will provide that feedback to us. Within the commercial leasing or building or residential spaces, the Internet of Things can play a part when you connect elevators to a system that gives you a warning when one of your elevators is going to break down. And one of the major elevator companies did this project with Microsoft, where they monitored over 1 million elevators in the United States, and they were able to predict which of the elevators were going to break down before they were going to break down. Now, that's preventive maintenance at its best, because you can forecast where you need to put your resources and how you need to run your work or your business and so on. So that's just one example. But when you talk about the smart grid, when energy efficiency is increased, when you talk about so many other aspects of connected spaces that are powered through the Internet of Things, when plants tell you, hey, I need some more water because you haven't watered me in 10 days, over a commercial space where you have thousands of different plants, that takes time and that takes resources. So you're able to put focus on a specific area through the Internet of Things. It's just a very ordinary example. Within smart cities, the Internet of Things will not only just connect buildings to people, but connect the connected cars to people, and as I mentioned before. We're talking about connecting healthcare services to people. We're talking about connecting utilities, so the list is endless. And the idea is that the Internet of Things paves way for us to create more value and to waste less resources when we go about doing our business, when we are living our lives at our homes or at our workplaces, or when we are commuting to work, or when we're just relaxing at the beach. So that's the idea behind the Internet of Things. Second technology I want to talk to you about today is artificial intelligence. Now, artificial intelligence is in use right now. So if any of you has a Netflix account, if you have an Amazon account, and you've already used artificial intelligence to some extent, because those search engines or those websites or those portals are powered by AI at the back, where they give you those recommendations based on what you've purchased, what you've watched, and so on and so forth. And really, the bottom line of artificial intelligence is that a computer is able to make a decision or take a decision or provide a recommendation based on information we feed that computer. And that's a very simple explanation of artificial intelligence. But that was the idea about 20 or 30 years ago. Today, we're talking about something called deep learning, where machines and computers are able to process a lot of information and create multiple outcomes or thousands of outcomes depending on the information we feed them. And that information gets translated into a decision that we can use or the machine can facilitate for us that can be used to some extent. Now, AI is a very complex field, and we're very far away from a mass-blown use of artificial intelligence in the real life. But it is already taking place. And before we know it, another 10 or 15 or 20 years, AI might be powering some of our smart cities and taking those decisions where we want to free up our resources. Last but not least, you might have heard the word blockchain. And blockchain is a technology that simplifies the way transactions are captured. In a traditional way, transactions are one-to-one. We record a transaction, and we note it down in one place, and it's the end. In blockchain, that one single transaction or that data is broken down into hundreds and thousands of pieces. It's stored across a network of connected computers. And the beauty of it is that if somebody tries to steal that information, crack it, hack it, they are unable to use any of that because they only get one very small piece of that information which is not usable. They need to connect it to all the other pieces in order to make sense, and that would take them days, hours, weeks, and years to do that. And that's why blockchain is fast becoming a very good standard of capturing information. And it's a technology that's still not very commercial, but definitely in the next few years, blockchain will power a majority of our commerce, starting from the banking sector. If you've heard about some of the smart cities around the world, two really stand out. One is Amsterdam, and one is Barcelona. They're considered to be the best examples of smart cities today. So Barcelona embarked on this project to create a smart city a few years ago, and within a few years, some of the results they got were they saved about $58 million per year just from saving and creating efficiency around water distribution. They generated $50 million in creating a solution to automate parking where people could use an app to find parking in the city. They saved about $37 million on street lighting by creating efficiency using the Internet of Things. And they also created about 47,000 jobs as a result of this technology transformation. I know a lot of people are talking about, how does this affect jobs? How does technology take away the jobs and, render us helpless? It's actually the opposite. If you join the technology revolution, you're actually going to be benefiting from the economy and the change that it brings. So there's a lot of jobs that technology creates. Another example is of Dubai. And Dubai is one of those places they want to be the first at doing everything. So they've embarked on a 2020 goal to be the world's first blockchain-powered country. They want the entire government to be powered by blockchain. So I just want you to get an idea that some technologies are creating headway and waves in many different other places, and it's time that we start looking at them very seriously. And as they get adopted where we live, we're actually familiar with what they do. Let me tell you about the 7 essentials of building smart cities. What is it going to take us to build a smart city? And really quickly, the 7 essentials. Now, the first one is you've got to be able to focus on engagement. And communication has changed the way we talk to people. And that has now moved from talking to people, from email, to talking to devices, talking to Internet of Things, enabled systems and buildings and plants and so on, and cars. And the biggest success will come from how we focus on engagement. How are we going to use that information that comes from my car and tells me the car has been going fast or slow or what have you? And how do we use that information? And that's really what engagement means. So within your spaces, within your work and your lives, you've got to start thinking about how do you engage with your tenants? How can you improve that experience of engaging with and working with the people who interact with your buildings? And the facilitator for that is definitely going to be technology to the most extent. Number 2 is focus on transformation and not disruption. I know disruption is a very common word, and we use it in every sense that everything is being disrupted. I really like the word transformation, though, because transformation takes us from where we are with what we have to the future. So think about your spaces as an example, your buildings, your real estate, and think how can that real estate be used, coupled with technology, to create different outcomes rather than create entirely new spaces. I really believe that we've got to be able to use existing infrastructure to create change in the fastest possible way, rather than create infrastructure from ground up. So transformation is the keyword that should resonate with all of you, rather than disruption. Number 3, there's no success if you don't take a stand. Like literally, we have got to stop postponing and procrastinating with some decisions that we really need to take. If you're building, your organization needs to take that decision of embarking on the cloud, embarking on new technologies, then please do it, because somebody else is already doing it, okay? And it's very important that we take the stand, we take the decision, because success will not come until we don't take that step. So you've got to push aside everything else and make that decision to take that leap of technology transformation. Start small, but you've got to start somewhere. Now, smart cities, our new technology-powered world, is going to need a lot of skills. It is going to need a lot of skilled manpower that is able to work with technology. So there's no other time to improve your credentials, to go and register for that course on Coursera or one of these websites where you get so much information, so much valuable information, that you can use that to power your careers and be part of this technology-powered economy and this technology revolution. So please get on those websites and register for a course that will teach you about technology, and it's going to be free for all I know. If you have credits through your workplace, please utilize them, but do use them to learn something new, because technology skills are in demand and they will be in demand going forward. So there's no escaping here. Now, success doesn't come because we always are successful. Success comes because we have to go through a few different failures in order to reach the place we have to reach. If we do not embark on those projects, then we will never know the outcome of those projects. We have to fail in some of our endeavors to be able to know how to be successful. And that's the mantra of this century. Leaders have to park their egos at the door, and they've got to work with people hand in hand and get into the trenches, roll up their sleeves, and everybody needs to work in a very collaborative fashion in order to get those results that you're looking for. Last but not least is creating a common set of values that is focused at the end result. I talk a lot about creating values that align the organization with the people that work in those organizations and that align with the mission statement of that organization. So people, management, company owners, leadership, individual contributors, they all need to work hand in hand in a very collaborative way to be able to leverage this new digitally powered economy. Number 6, you've got to focus on value creation. If you focus on generating revenue, it's a great goal, but I feel it's a very small goal. Generating revenue, making the money, making the bucks, it's a very, very tiny goal compared to what you can actually do by embodying all these principles. When you keep value creation at the core of and at the foundation of what you want to do, you're doing much more than driving revenue. You're creating a change in places that you can't even imagine with that financial sense. So please keep value creation, and I want you to go back with this word, value creation. I want all of you to think about yourselves as value creators for your organization when you go back, rather than your role or your title. So value creation is going to be the essence of driving us to the new future of the connected cities, the connected cars, and getting the results that help us live a better life. Last but not least, this is also the economy of and the era of acknowledging good results. It is the era of rewarding people and organizations when the time is right. So you've always got to be able to recognize your successes. Don't play them down. Even if you succeed, just an inch, just an iota, give yourself the credit that you have really succeeded. If you finish one of those courses that you are who's going to get on those courses? Anybody? No hands? Anybody? Please register for those courses on Coursera. If you finish that course, please give yourself the credit that you've actively taken a step to be part of this digitally powered economy that is giving rise to smart cities. Some predictions, and they will come true by 2030 for smart cities. By 2020, 10% of smart cities will use street lamps as the backbone for a smart city WAN, a wide area network. In Barcelona, street lamps already have Wi-Fi connectivity, and they're providing internet coverage through the entire city. And this will happen more and more in our cities in the United States. By 2020, 30% of smart cities will use smart and robotics in nursing care and medical facilities. This is where healthcare is going to be part of smart cities. This is how, something so close to us is going to have such a dramatic impact because it's connected. And there's so many more predictions, but the bottom line is, by 2030, maybe artificial intelligence will start running some of our cities. So that is coming. And Internet of Things is going to be a huge part of what we do every day in our lives, in our premises. Next steps. You are a key building block for the cities of tomorrow. Make technology an integral part of your learning starting right now. You've got to start learning. And engage in a meaningful conversation immediately. Meet with all the people that you can meet. Have all the technology conversations that you can have at the BOMA conference. And really, go create the future at BOMA 2017. Thank you so much.
Now, please welcome to the stage our panelists for this morning's discussion, Tommy Russo, Chief Technology Officer for Ackridge, Steve Weichel, Head of Industry Relations at the MIT Center for Real Estate, and James Whalen, Senior Vice President and Chief Information Officer for Boston Properties.
I would say, yeah, you're figured it out. Thanks, welcome. So we're here at BOMA 2017, and it is my greatest pleasure to be part of this powerful panel, not because it's powerful because the people in the panel are powerful, but because their ideas have a lot of power. They are some of the industry's innovators and thinkers, and really some of the insights they can provide to us are of tremendous amount of value. So it's my honor to welcome all three of you to the stage today, and I'm hoping we can have some agreements and disagreements and really fight over issues and things that really make a difference. Though, right? Yeah, no, absolutely. Right. We have about 45 minutes and Q&A afterwards, and there's microphones within the aisle. So if you have questions during the Q&A, please come up to the microphones and ask us the questions. It'd be our pleasure to answer them and for the panelists. But let me start off, first of all, with getting everybody to introduce themselves and to tell us a little bit about their role and also tell us, how is technology disruption presently, changing the lives of building owners and managers. So starting with you, Tommy, if you can give us an intro and then more.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Good morning. Hope everyone's having a great day and a great conference. It's been a very nice experience for me. My name is Tommy Russo. I am the Chief Technology Officer and Senior Vice President at Ackridge. We are a DC-based real estate firm. We full service. We build buildings, lease space, and make great places. As it pertains to technology, I've lived it for the last 20 years. Ackridge is in business for 43 years. I've been with them for 20, running the technology department. The disruptors are changing every day. So whatever you say today, tomorrow will be a different technology disruptor. 10 years ago, you look at it, and everyone had a cell phone because they could make telephone calls. And I would tend to guess that if we polled the audience, 90% of the people in this room use their telephone to make data transactions, text messages, read emails, get on the internet, more so than they use it for a telephone call. So why we call it a cell phone, I don't really know. And that's the whole morph of
mobile device.
Mobile device. That's a much better term, but that's not really where you hear it. So how technology touches everybody in every specific way is going to get bigger, better, and badder as time persists. From your personal life, that's when you become comfortable with technology. When you become comfortable with it in your personal life, then it becomes expected in the workplace. And as it becomes expected in the workplace, that's really where we have to make it easy enough for everyone to use and everyone to embrace.
Thank you, Tommy. Jim, please go ahead.
Steve? Jim?
Oh, sorry.
Who should
Steve,
go first?
You go ahead, Steve.
I'll go
Sorry.
first.
Yeah,
I'm
I
Steve
have-
Weichel. I'm the head of industry relations at the MIT Center for Real Estate in Cambridge, Massachusetts. How many of you knew there was a Center for Real Estate at MIT? Okay, a few hands, thank you. We're a best kept secret. The center's been around about 33 years, and it was founded early on to do two things, research and education. And as part of the research, naturally at MIT, we're looking at innovation, technology, and entrepreneurism that has gone on for years within the industry. So recently we announced a new innovation lab last year. And the Innovation Lab focuses on a number of topics, but especially the area of real estate tech, this category of new startups and new technology that are impacting the industry pretty significantly. And that's the work that we do. And just to give you a sense, some data points on this, 48 months ago there were a handful of startups, and now our database is up over 1,700, almost 1,800 real estate tech startups, specifically looking at our industry. And ReTech, we didn't know it was ReTech before, but that's the equivalent of health tech and fintech and all of the techs you hear about. So those of you from overseas, prop tech, sometimes called CRE-tech, that database has grown exponentially, and I uncover new firms every day. I find them or they find us. And they're all taking a look at how to improve an industry that, for the most part, is running off 35-year-old technology called the spreadsheet, which was, 1982, right? I hear the laughs out there. We're still running this multi-trillion-dollar industry off spreadsheet. Oh, but wait, we had a huge innovation about 10 years ago, 15 years ago, called the PDF. So this is an exciting time, and as Tommy said, it's happening so quickly. In 4 years to go from basically zero to 2,000 or 2,500 or 3,000 firms. And one last data point, and I'll pass it off to Jim. The venture capital that's going into this particular space, and again, we look at a bunch of different innovation, but specifically in the real estate tech and this startup land, the amount of venture capital in 2011 was a couple of $100 million, fairly nothing in startup land. But this year expected to be $3 billion. Again, in the startup world, $3 billion, it's a big number, but it's not as big as we've seen in other categories. But for real estate tech, just a phenomenal amount of money coming from outside sources to help disrupt or to encourage, I don't know if they're all helping, but to encourage disruption in the industry. So, thanks.
And Jim Whalen, I'm Senior Vice President CIO for Boston Properties, not the CTO title. But I've been in the space for 30 years, 19 years at Boston Properties, and I would just echo both, what Steve and Tommy said. It's really just about the pace of change. I mean, I was at Realcomm just 2 weeks ago. I was on a venture panel. We had some venture, with Fifth Wall and some others, and the numbers were 2,200 to 2,700 for firms in our space. I mean, that is just unprecedented, and just echoing the amount of investment that Steve's referencing is really just simply unprecedented. Yeah. I mean, we were through the first .com cycle, nothing like a reference point what's going on right now. So I think the challenge, I'll give this audience one thing to think about is, real estate that we talked about, like, operates at 25 miles an hour. The consumer space or other spaces operate 120 miles an hour, right? And there is some fundamental shifting going on. We've actually gone through this huge development construction, which is still very active right now. Lots of new technologies rolling into our buildings and our spaces. In that investment cycle, we're dealing with our existing buildings and how we retrofit and bring technology into that. But I think there's a fundamental thing to think about, and one of the things is a cloud mobile first. Right? That has been a fundamental shift in products that are designed out of the gate with the latest technology and with this alignment. I mean, you could take an old app and move it and host it in the cloud, but that's not cloud first. And that provides a platform for iterative innovation at a pace that is, again, not our reference points that went back 5-10 years ago. It's just we don't have those reference points. You'd have a one release cycle a year. That is over, right?
If you're lucky, one release.
Yeah, and you think about the VTS Hightower, I call it a street brawl before they merged, right? They were literally releasing every other day to keep up with each other in the escalation wars. Now that might have been overkill. I think it was overkill, right? You can't absorb it. But you think about the things that we get from our consumer-based apps on our phones. New features just come down, and we absorb them, right? Without any instruction or anything like that. And again, I think that's a kind of a paradigm that we have to think about in how we operate our buildings and the software providers. I mean, we have building systems now that are operating in the cloud, right? We have parking systems operating in the cloud, right? So the way to, again, I think there's just this paradigm shift pivot that we have to think about how we manage those technologies and platforms. So.
Thank you very much. And really, it's the era of transformation. You know, there's transformation taking place at every level, everywhere. And sometimes it's just too much transformation. You don't know where to focus on. So the folks here today are literally very focused on commercial real estate. And we have a few topics that we're going to talk about that specifically talk about commercial real estate. How does technology transformation change your lives? So Tommy, let me take it over to you and ask you something, about an investment within technology. Could you describe, the unprecedented level of investment that is taking place in commercial real estate tech, and how CRE firms are benefiting from investments in technology?
Absolutely. Look, commercial real estate is four things, and most people would say it's location, 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 location. But that's really changing. And I really look at it as location, space, efficiency, and comfort. Location being obviously important because if you're in the middle of the desert, maybe no one will come. But that didn't work for Las Vegas. They built it in the middle of the desert, people came. So it's changing. But the space, my space is the same as the space across the street. There's four walls, elevators, offices. What can I do inside the space to make it more efficient, effective, and comfortable for the people inside the building? The marble's the same, the glass is the same, as the wood is the same, as the architecture going to spec. What I can do as a building owner and as a commercial real estate company is I can make the technology in the building easy enough or transparent for you, the user. And if it's transparent, just like the updates Jim said, you get an update to an app, you don't think about it, you do it, and if there's a little pain involved, you get through it real quick. But as it pertains to real estate, that has not been the course. The course has been, let's let 10 or 20 other people do it first, make sure it works okay, and then we'll jump in with both feet. So destination-based elevators. Is everyone familiar with what destination-based elevators are? We put one in 1997. It was, people were, that's not too good, that's not too good, that's not too good. It took about 15 years for people to really start doing it. I think one of the third or fourth installation was the Marquis Marriott in New York City. The wait time for an elevator was around 4 to 7 minutes. They put a destination-based elevator in the New York Times Square Marquis Marriott, and it took the wait time down to about 2 to 3 minutes. From that point on, every Marriott, every JW Marriott, and any big Marriott put it in. And that was a big change. And that, how did it affect you, the user? You were able to get out of that building faster, in the city faster, making your stay at Marriott a better place. And that's what's going to happen with the real estate industry. How it's making it easier from efficiencies are, I can tell whether my building is running efficiently or not efficiently by putting sensors in that cost $3 instead of $3,000. So instead of having a sensor on a panel on a floor, maybe I have it on a breaker on a floor. Or instead of having it in just the main entrance to the building, I have it on each floor. And I can see the efficiencies of the building, when I need electricity and when I don't need electricity. Maybe I need to cool the building at night, not during the day. You touched on it earlier. Microsoft did that study with 1 million elevators and can predict when elevators were going to fail. Well, I can predict when an air handler is going to fail or a compressor is going to fail via using efficiencies in modeling and AI to make sure that my compressors are running efficiently and effectively as possible. What does that mean for you as an occupant of the building? If your air is always 70 degrees and you never feel it go down, you're never in discomfort. You're never upset. And everyone knows, if you go to a restaurant and have a bad experience, you tell everyone. If you go to a restaurant and have a great experience, you tell no one. So same thing in your office building. Your air conditioning and heating could work 364 days a year. One day a year it didn't work. It happened to be 100 degrees outside and 100% humidity. And didn't you tell everyone? And now you got a bad name. Yeah. So in protecting that, by making sure that all your systems are running more effectively by using technology, artificial intelligence, maintenance, prediction, all the things the IoT offers, which I like to say, everyone says the IoT is the newest thing. Well, the IoT is not new. It's been used for at least the last 20 years that I know of. It's now coming to the forefront and becoming expected everywhere, which is really important. And the last piece is comfort. And you spend more time in your office building awake than you do at your house awake. You're always comfortable at your house, and if you're not, it's your call. In an office building, you really don't have that much control over comfort. The board, the building as a whole, decides where it's going to be. Your lease decides where your comfort level is going to be. So taking that and giving you the ability to say that you have a feel on it, even if it's a thermostat on the wall that you go up and touch and you perceive that the temperature goes down 3 degrees because you touched it and said it went down, you feel better. And giving you that ability to now possibly take it to a mobile device that everyone has, that it's not a cell phone, it's a mobile device.
If I take that point of comfort and the ability to do much more, and you're able to reduce the time that people are waiting and waiting for elevators as an example. Let me take it over to you, Steve. You're with MIT. You're one of the greatest institutions in the world, not just in the United States, and a center for thought leadership. Now, how are you looking at, from where you are, with the investments that are going into commercial real estate from a technology perspective? Are you seeing a trend? Are you seeing a shift?
We haven't been following that specifically. I think anecdotally, the conversation, for example, I just had a conversation with a VC about the difference between technology and real estate. Real estate has a 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 year cycle or arc. Yeah. And technology has a 10, 20, 30 minute arc. So there's this tension between an industry that due to some very valid reasons is a much longer term, slower velocity kind of environment, whereas technology investing is a super high velocity environment. So there will be this tension, and add to that there's career risk. So how did you make these decisions? Who did you have to convince, and what if it had all blown up?
I would be sitting in this chair.
No. I mean, you probably.
But you got to sell it to the investors because
it's a great point in that but also as an organization, you can only absorb so much. As an organization, so there's a cadence. So there's 2,200, 2,300 companies out there. As a company, you can only absorb so much on a given cycle. Right. So you have to hopefully pick the winners, and that's our job. And how we
or they merge.
Yes.
Or they merge. Yeah. Yeah. We're to your question. We're in the startup life cycle. You mentioned the innovation. What was the curve you had up? The
hype cycle.
Hype cycle, right? The hype cycle. Yep. But they're in the startup cycle. We're now starting to see mergers. We're starting to see companies that don't get another round. We're starting to see acquisitions by larger companies. So, it's hard to predict, but I think there's some convergence going on and some settling going on. At the same time, dozens and dozens of new startups coming in. On the other end.
Yeah. Jim, do you see a trend there? You were talking about it a lot in our earlier conversations. The startup investments, and give us your opinion on this.
Well, I do think. Really keying off what Steve is saying. There's a fundamental conflict, or not conflict, but tension about our ability to absorb these solutions, these platforms. And again, I was talking earlier, you've got a couple of dimensions. You've got the new construction, new development that'll kind of bring in new technology on a construction side and even on a system side. And then from an organization perspective, again, we're a large organization. You can only absorb so much. So I do think there's some tension that I don't know how the 2,200 survive. I mean, that's a reality, and they won't. And there'll be a willowing out of. Or weeding out of the winners and the losers, right?
Okay. So. Thank you. Steve, let me ask you the next question. What are the top trends or top pain points, if you will, with technology disruption in commercial real estate? So how are commercial real estate managers feeling the pain? What is most painful for them?
Well, a couple. Jim mentioned a few. The challenge is the technology is moving much faster than the industry. And so how do we even begin to implement new ideas when they're changing so quickly? And I don't quite know how that will turn out. You guys struggle with it on a daily basis. I think there's some other big trends going on. We speak of one major trend as real estate fracking. And real estate, this is Dennis Frenchman.
It's an MIT term, right?
Yeah, that's an MIT term.
Yeah.
That's an MIT. So you know what petroleum fracking is, right? We go in, we break up, we use water to go in and break up and unleash the extra petroleum that was in the ground. So think about real estate fracking. Think about an asset that gets broken apart, the use of it gets broken apart into smaller pieces and reconfigured into higher value versions. So the great example is WeWork or Airbnb. They are further increasing optimization, they're lowering friction. What does that mean for the underwriting? So we're moving to, we have the students in our program, they have on-demand cars, on-demand living, on-demand food, on-demand pet walking. They don't own anything. So they expect to have on-demand office. So now you're on a license model. Can we run the office industry off of what is basically a hotel model? It's a license model. I don't know the answer to that question. We're looking into it. But it's a kind of a provocative idea as we move to software as a service, as real estate as a service.
Yeah.
So,
Did you want to add a comment to that for us?
I think a lot of the people that are creating these startups are from the industry, and they're seeing pain points that all of the property managers, the engineers are facing, and they're running with them, because that's where all the ideas come from. And the fact that there's $2 billion out there for VCs and that their money is accessible, I don't think 10 years ago there would have been even $100 million. I mean,
this boom is different than the dot-com boom.
I recall in '99, I put a web camera on a construction hole to film the building of the building, and our owners were like, don't do that, don't waste your time. I had an Igloo cooler with a compact computer in it and filmed this building being built. Yeah. At the end of the building being built, they came back to us and said, well, there's 34 days of rain delay, 17 more than we had budgeted for, therefore the building's going to be delayed 17 days. And I was like, that's odd. I went back and counted the number of rain days, and it was 15 rain days. But that was a $350,000 difference per day of occupancy that the contractor had to get back to us. One of the employees of the contractor started a company that is now the biggest company out there that does this commercially all over the country, because he saw it and said, hey, this is a huge business, and now it's a game changer. Yeah. And I think that everyone in this room has ideas, and there's plenty of money out there to go out there and get it done, because the best ideas, as I meet with every new employee, say, come from you guys. You feel the pain, share the pain, tell us what it is, and maybe we can help you, because there are 2,700 today. Maybe tomorrow there's 5,400. Maybe only 100 of them survive, but that 100 that survive will make your job and life easier.
By the way, we broke down the database, and the founders, about 30% are Bay Area, and about 25% are New York, and the rest are sprinkled around the world. That changes all the time. So with the profile, and we're intrigued by this, by who is the founder, where did they come from? And the Bay Area group, this is a generalization, but the Bay Area group tends to be a tech-savvy group that suddenly discovered this multi-trillion-dollar industry.
Our industry, right.
Our industry, which hasn't been disrupted
in
a long time. Yep. And so they salivate over this, and they start looking for problems, and they get together with real estate people to find out where the problems are. The New York crowd approached it differently. Those are mostly exhausted real estate people, tired of
quicker, better, faster.
Quicker, better, faster, and then they hire the technology. And Hightower and VTS are a great example. And you knew them early on, and they had a little bit different approach, but they were kind of solving the same.
But fundamentally the same.
Fundamentally the same, but
same solution.
They had a different kind of approach. Not that one is better than the other one, but it is the coastal difference is interesting, how they approach solving a problem.
Thanks. I actually have a question for you, Jim, and you can add to this, the challenges of the industry along with the experiences. Now, builders have an experience with this entire technology interaction, as you mentioned, and we talk a lot more about tenant experiences and what tenants will feel, but I think builders have their own experiences as well. So, Jim, if you could help us understand, how is technology changing the tenant experience and how occupants engage with
I'll key off what Tommy said earlier, but it maybe even take a little further. I mean, it's just that, when we have tenants like WeWork, there's a big tenant of ours, Salesforce and Google, and you have engineers working in our building, in our space, with their expectation of how they interact with that space. Number one, just out of the gate, connectivity, right? I want to be able to be connected wherever I am, so it's seamless in and out of the building. But then I want to be able to use this device, which is my, to interact. I already do so much with this device. How do I get in the building? I don't want to. Why should I have a security guard or a card? What if I want to affect the comfort of my space? There's companies like Comfy, which are basically crowdsourcing your. I can say we could all say whether you're hot, cold on my phone, and it would send a 10-minute blast into the space here, right? If everyone we got to that point, and there's machine learning involved in that interaction. So, and you think about it, you just take it one step further about our children, or even myself. We've got an Alexa at home. How you are interacting, just voice commands, and things change and things interact. So I think the expectation of how we allow for that accommodation, and that's also a fundamental clash. Because a lot of the systems in a multi-tenanted building were never architected, and even the security system were never architected for these kind of use cases. So, but they're not going away. So our challenge is how do we adopt it? How do we figure it out? How do we do this integration to make? And that's a big part of what we do from a technology team and how we are working these days. I mean, just that those use cases are not going away. So.
And the retrofit versus the new is almost a completely different conversation, or quite a bit different conversation.
I'm not so sure. Depends on the system platform, and these use cases then come along in the construction cycle, and we didn't think about that, But yeah. So I'm not sure it's. I'm dealing with a bunch of them right now.
Maybe not completely, but we're dealing with a legacy system is quite different than starting from scratch.
I do. That's true, Steve. So.
And it depends on the system. I mean, for example, access control. Sure. Everyone wants to have Bluetooth control from their access their space. Everyone wants it. I don't want to carry a fob. I want to be able to have my mobile device in my pocket, walk into my space. Well, if your space was designed with the reader on the right-hand side, and you have your phone in your left-hand pocket, you walk up to the door and you look like a big dummy because your door doesn't open. So when you redesign the space as new construction, you have to take that into consideration and put the reader somewhere where, the Bluetooth hits everywhere. So it really depends on the system. Kiosk walking into a building, same thing.
And we're looking at biometrics, for entry through gates, and there's a solution for that. It's a more facial recognition in terms of, and your gate learns your gate over time. That's all. But that's all about the experience of engaging with.
Really,
your
it learns your gate, GAIT.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
Wow.
Yep, it gets better and better and faster at recognizing
every time it sees you.
Besides just your face. So.
Tommy, have you, and I don't know if you guys saw the video that Henry played earlier. It was all about technology and how exactly,
we were getting dizzy a little bit.
Yeah,
it was definitely a motion sickness there.
Yeah.
I look at that, and I think most of that's available today. I don't think there's anything that's far off of that today. I don't know if everybody, Google brought out the Google glasses. I don't know how many people got a pair. I got a pair. They were pretty cool, but
of course you did.
I wore them like 3 times. And I was like, yeah, this isn't for me. I think that autonomous vehicles will be to that level. If my glasses or my phone has to tell me to watch out for a pole, I think I have bigger problems. I don't know if you caught that. She's walking, watch out for the pole. I think that technology plays a role in making us more intelligent. I do not want to see technology make us dumber. Mm-hmm. And if we continue on the path of that extreme, maybe it takes us to a path where the Matrix becomes true and they think for us. I don't think that's going to happen, and I think there's too many smart people in this room that wouldn't allow that to happen, but there's not much off of it. I can tell you from a perspective of being able to control everything. You should be able to, and there are technologies out there today that you can put in your commercial real estate or your residential or your retail that will control every piece of the pie. How much do you want to spend? It all boils down to the tenant improvement dollars and what they want to spend their money on. Yeah. I think it's really cool, and I think from a perspective of being able to see things, it's spot on. Yeah. But I don't think it's that futuristic.
There's the flip side of it too. We're gathering these immense amounts of data.
Yes.
Immense amounts of data, but we're only scratching it.
What we're doing with it.
What
Yep.
does IDC say? 0.5% of the data is actually being looked at.
Very early innings for real estate and that whole scope of it's the whole idea of continuous commissioning and what all the data you can source from a building. Very early innings, but you can see the promise and where it's headed, right?
See the promise, but can barely get your head around what to do with all of it. Yeah. By the way, did you see the screen? The construction. It's a safety. It's a kind of a heads up. It's a larger version of Google Glass.
Yes.
So that when you're on the construction
You
site,
can
have you
see-
used
yes.
it? Have
No,
you seen
no,
it?
we have not used it. We have seen it.
Familiar with it?
I haven't seen it.
Yeah, so it's sort of an augmented, and as I mentioned earlier, IKEA just announced using Pokemon, the technology for Pokemon Go, to help us look at their furniture in my living room and scale it. And has anybody used this? It just came out. Yeah, so pretty interesting that if somebody can do that in their living room, you can bet if they're in the real estate business, they are going to expect to use it out on the job site soon enough.
We had a client, Home Depot has an app where you can take a picture of a room and touch walls and change the color. We had a client like, we want this color. Well, okay, it's your space, do what you want.
Yeah.
But it's coming, and the people are going to expect
It's
it.
happening really fast.
Steve, you mentioned the term data earlier, and big data is something we've been hearing. It came as a trend, and it's gone, but it's still here. And fundamentally, everything around us is generating a lot of data. Can you tell us from your perspective I'm not going to say how does MIT look at big data, but what are you looking at in terms of big data? What should we know about big data in general?
Well, certainly what I just mentioned, that it's not about getting a lot of data. I think big data is sort of misleading, as if it's big, it's good. It's more small data and smart data. And so we are seeing some startups are gathering just very specific kind of data and then maybe merging it with some public sources, because we have two things going on, or three things going on. Immense amounts of public data that are getting unlocked in ways that were never available before. Tremendous crowdsourcing of data. So Jim mentioned Comfy, and the other one is Crowd Comfort. Think of Waze, where they're gathering all that data when we use Waze to get around town and provide value to the users. What if that starts showing up in versions of real estate, which is really what Crowd Comfort and Comfy are doing. They're crowdsourcing the data. So we've got this crowdsourced data, which is much cleaner and much purer and much more focused. And then some companies are unlocking data with AI and machine learning. Leverton's doing this. They're unlocking it in a way that we could never get at it before. So it sort of makes your head throb. We've got these three different kinds of data, and the key is, and none of it talks to one another. So the key with the really successful startups are the ones that are figuring out how to identify it specifically to the problem and then get it to talk to one another.
Yeah.
So we're very early innings on the data issue.
Jim, what's your take on data in general? What should commercial real estate managers, property owners know about data in general that will be useful for them?
Well, so I'll say two things, I guess. One is, at Boston Properties, for example, this is probably 8 or 9 years ago. The last decade we did a lot more custom work, right? Not get rid of them, but we downsized our kind of custom group of programmers, and we went all data, because data was a competitive advantage for the company. So I have a data architect on my team. I have data specialists. I've got a team, because that's a competitive advantage for Boston Properties.
And those titles didn't exist 3 years ago.
Those didn't exist. Yeah. I mean, we're doing this investment. So the journey has been mostly around our financial and our ability to really tune and have a pulse on just all the data points that come in that kind of give guidance and move us forward as a company. And but that's turning. And now focusing, this journey starts. The journey starts, and then you start to pivot. And we've done some major investments around energy, or energy data, rationalizing, basically almost like an ERP for energy. And that has just been, as a company now, we are stating sustainability goals publicly. We're a public company that has to state and then we can measure it, right? So this pivot to data, and I fully expect, Steve, it's going to be, we're really focused on what that next play is. Because the next play is a number of providers around the energy space, especially, are about aggregating pulling all that data out of your system, but then complementing it with occupancy data and additional sensors you put in the space, and integrating other points to basically do fault tolerance, fault detection, not fault tolerance, but fault detection, and to really kind of optimize how your building operates. So I mean, it's a very interesting, but I do think that's kind of where things are headed here.
Well,
right?
we are in this startup cycle also seeing the intersection of legal tech and real estate tech.
Yes.
We're seeing the intersection of energy tech and real estate tech, fintech and real estate tech, and maybe it'll all be the same thing someday, I don't know, but really because they impact one another, we see it on the ground, and the startups are starting to recognize it.
Let me actually build on that and ask you a question. So going from, Jim has a team of data architects, they're drilling into data, figuring out what to do with it, how our buildings are, organized in terms of information. From where you are, how do you see the emergence of, the cloud, the cloud-based ERP, the all-cloud mobility as well? So how do you see technology driving the leasing of buildings? Some technologies that maybe you're using to get insights. Tell us more about it.
So the biggest change I see is 10 years ago, I didn't look at a lease. Technology had nothing to do with the lease. It was signed by the legal department, the leasing department, it was done. I don't think in the last 3 years, maybe 2 years, a lease hasn't come across our company that I haven't had to weigh in on. From connectivity to what energy to every piece of the building. I look at probably 15 pieces of every lease that our company goes through, from an LOI to execution. And a lot of that is because the leasing brokers don't have the technology background to look at what we can and cannot offer, but I also look at it as the automation process, VTS. We were an early adopter of VTS, and that made our space very easy to do, and the tracking of the first tour to the LOI to the signed lease became a workflow that became very easy to track and trace. Building technology and the lease have become almost one. 5 years ago, no one would have asked for connectivity in their space. Now we're getting leases their people are walking away from space with no connectivity. And if you can't guarantee it, they're not going to come sign it. And anybody that's ever stepped into that space knows it's a really slippery slope. I can't promise you Verizon coverage unless Verizon says, I'm going to bring you my service. So doing that dance with the client is very difficult. If the client has a huge contract, it becomes very easy. And then lastly, it's education. So I can build the smartest, best building there is. If I have a client that's going to take 90% of it or 70% of that building, and they say, yeah, we're not going to put any of that into our space. You may have it in the core and shell, but we're not going to put it into the space of our building. That becomes a real hardship for me as a person. And then I have to try and work with the leasing team to try and get the architects who are building the space out to make that space meet the technology. And as new technology takes hold, it becomes a lot easier because it becomes industry standard. Yeah. Once something becomes industry standard, it's very easy. VRF, DOAS, all these new HVAC systems, people are like, oh, I don't want to go in that building because it's not, a VAV, or it's not a heat pump, or it's not this, or it's not that. So educating the client, the leasing broker, really becomes a very big priority to make sure they understand what they're selling. It goes back to data points, and everyone has a car, and no one probably drives from the 70s or 80s, where you had a speedometer and a gas gauge. Now your car has 6,000 or 7,000 data points, and what are the two things you look at? Speedometer and gas gauge. It hasn't changed that much, but when you bring it to the dealership and plug it in, they get 8,000 points and tell you, oh, spark plug number 1 has a short in it, so we're just going to change that. They don't charge you $800 to look at it. And telling the leasing guys, hey, look at the speedometer and the gas gauge, it becomes a little more tough because they don't understand what's behind the scenes in that. Mm-hmm. So you build a building. We just built a building with 158,000 data points. The client didn't care. The client, we want offices for our partners. We want comfort space. In making them understand what they needed to do to make the space, we put a lighting system in the building. As the building as a whole, making them tie on to it, we couldn't do. We asked them and showed them and gave it to them, and they did. Okay. And that ability takes the building to the level where we really need it to be so that we can use the big data and make the building smarter, better, and faster.
We sometimes get wrapped up in the technology, especially at MIT. We're enamored by the latest shiny thing, but it really comes down, it really comes down to the problem that gets solved for the to your point, to the users. That's where we become heroes, not because it's the coolest, most elegant solution.
Yep.
Sometimes it's not the most elegant solution, but it solves the problem.
Yep. Jim, let me ask you, let me move the discussion. We are almost out of time. We have a few more minutes remaining. But let's move to a very sensitive topic, which is cyber attacks. And protecting these assets, protecting buildings, occupants, there's a huge responsibility right there. So what do owners and managers need to do in order to protect the occupancy of the buildings from new threats that are posed by techs, including cyber?
You can imagine on a portfolio like ours, I spend a lot of time on cyber, and there's a general awakening going on in our space around the cyber threat, and I mean it's being driven, as all of you know. The analog to IP, which is like an Ethernet cable, is changing, right? So IP cables are going to VAV boxes. They're going to every single camera. If you're not over yet, every camera is over, coming over. You just have we talked about IoT. You just got to connect it. That comes up all the time. Got to connect it, right? So the proliferation of other endpoints that are actually being tied to a network is not stopping. And then we talked about data. So you got these fundamental changes, fundamental drivers going on. And if you look at our industry, it really hasn't necessarily been stepping up. Our providers, the manufacturers, aren't necessarily embedding the technology in their product. And a lot of what we deal with is legacy. It's been around, again, this 40-year cycle. We don't change systems. It has to be a capital event and maybe 20-year event, right? So we got old stuff. Our integrators, they just want to get the job done and get out, right? They don't have security on their checklist. People that maintain our systems, they just want to keep it running. Many of you in the room, right? It's not my area of expertise, so I'm not going to deal with it, right? IT, a lot of IT, it's not my area of responsibility. There's building systems, right? Well, that all has to be broken down. I mean, I would challenge this room that you can't hide behind, it's not my area of expertise, because this fundamentally deals with the reputation of our companies, on behalf of our customers and our occupants in our building. And there's so it's a challenge that we have to step up to. And the thing I want to mention is 2 weeks ago at Realcomm, let's date ourselves about a year ago, a group of companies got together after Realcomm. It was kind of like a little group setting. It was probably about 10 of us. And we started to talk, what are people doing about this? There were people who were vested in this topic. And we went up morphing this group into launching a consortium 2 weeks ago that is about 14 organizations of owners, universities, MIT is in it, your facility group is in it, and government. So it's a group of about 14 companies that are focused on awareness, around sharing of best practices, and hopefully socializing that around the industry so we can all elevate our game. And then lastly, for influencing our vendors, our providers and our integrators, right? So there's again, lots you can do. Yeah. I mean, personally, real quick, how do you protect your house? You lock your doors, you have alarm systems, you buy insurance to protect your house. We do the same with our data centers and our enterprise data. I mean, how do I protect all the financials and everything goes on? That same mentality needs to be brought and is being brought to how we run our buildings, and that paradigm needs to be. So I challenge this group to engage and partner with your IT groups because it's a very critical issue for our industry.
Steve, how do you see cybersecurity, privacy, and really real estate come together?
Well, certainly privacy. When we talk about data and sourcing all of this and the transparency, and we know how it is. We download the app because we needed the app. We never read all of the fine print that basically gives up all of our privacy. We waive all of that. So there will always be a tension between this tension between gathering the data versus. Sometimes this argument still goes on about who owns the data. I think that genie is long out of the bottle. And then, so I don't know how that will get resolved. And privacy is different in different countries. So some of the startups, there may be similar startups. There's a VTS Hightower in Brazil I know of, and I'm sure that their relationship with who owns the data and what the privacy is quite different than it is in the U.S. So it'll be different. Those of you who are not in the U.S., it'll be different from country to country.
Yeah. Tommy, cybersecurity and real estate.
2 words, TJ Maxx and Target. Both of them were hacked from the contractor perspective. HVAC contractors got out there. At Ackridge, we've looked at it as a holistic approach from day one. Every one of my building systems is behind the exact same firewall as my corporation. So from day one, whether it's the widget at the end of the device to the PC on the network, it is 100% secure through MAC filtering and a whole boatload of different things. The nerd that I am, when I go to a building that's not mine, I usually pull up my laptop and see if I can hack the systems. I'd be willing to say that 4 out of 10, I can get right into the energy management system, which is scary, because if you think about the fact that I could walk into a building, or anybody that, I'm not devious, but there are devious people out there that could walk into a building and cut your HVAC system off and basically maybe put ransomware on it so you can't turn it back on for a certain amount of time. It affects every one of you.
Yeah.
And it becomes huge. So
that was a $1 billion industry last year.
Yeah,
Ransomware.
If you're not thinking about security or haven't thought about it, you should definitely go back and talk to your technology department and make sure that your building is secure. I'm telling you, 4 out of 10 are not secure.
And I'll just comment. Even if you're small to large, there's models. I've been engaged with a couple of smaller companies that are tackling this very creatively, but it's important. Suburban owners who are actually doing audits, doing inventories, putting a very basic blueprint. You and I may have higher up the curve. It doesn't have to necessarily be sophisticated, but needs to be done. Attention needs to be paid to it.
Because how it works now is you put a building automation system in. IT doesn't have anything to do with it. It's the mechanical guy or the engineers in the building, and the mechanical contractor says, "I need internet access." Yep. So they call Comcast or Verizon or whoever and plug it in, and that's the extent of the security. Yeah. Well, if the IT department doesn't know about it, we can't protect it. If we can't protect it, I'm telling you right now, it's not internal to the country. There is people, but we have 30 couple buildings, and on a weekly basis, we see penetration checks, scares from all over the globe. I don't know what they want, nor do I care what they want, but I want to make sure I can see it and I can stop it. And you have to do that. That's going to be the single biggest threat to any technologically advanced building.
Okay, thank you. I want to ask the last question. We're literally out of time in 30 or 45 seconds, in less than a minute. We're going to talk about emerging technologies and what's coming tomorrow within the industry, and what is your takeaway for our attendees going back from this conference? What are the emerging technologies they should look at? And any words of
30
wisdom?
seconds.
30 seconds. You've got almost a minute to go.
Yeah. So the things I'm looking. I'm writing some technology briefs for the leadership of our company, and I'm focused on our lobby operations and some biometrics. I'm looking at driverless cars, but more for what can you do even before that. There's things you can do with partnerships with Uber and Lyft and others that might really be creative, and then AI and machine learning. So we're looking at more around taking our leases, running them through AI machine learning platforms, taking that unstructured data, making it structured, because we have people that actually just spend their days doing that and abstracting, and there's a whole cadre of a couple of solutions out in the market right now focused on that space. So real quick.
Thank you.
We're taking a look at this great convergence that's going on between the different categories of technology, and everything that Jim said. Looking at the companies that are specifically as a kind of a point solution, but eventually there will be mergers, and how will that integrate and impact the industry, and how quickly will that happen? And for those of you who are interested, I'll be talking a lot about that this afternoon in my session, looking at not all 1,700, but really taking a deeper dive into that if you're interested in learning about the different areas that they're active in. But that convergence is going to happen really fast, and it's going to impact the winners and the losers and how we run the business.
I would tell you Alexa, and take it for what you want, but Alexa and the platform to which that port can power a house or a building is going to change the way you really think about how you live your life. And from when you get comfortable with it in your home, then you will be comfortable with it in your office environment. Instead of getting an email from your property manager saying, "Hey, there's ice cream in the lobby today," what's to stop you from saying, "Hey, Alexa, what's going on in the building today?" Or what's the traffic outside? What's the weather? All those things. And maybe Alexa doesn't win, but there is a device like that that is going to be out there, and it's going to change everyone's life for the better.
Yeah, I mean, Apple has a competitor. I mean, it's all.
I only say Alexa because they have the delivery side of it. But I mean, that could definitely change. And the ability for them to big think, like you said earlier, when you go to Amazon's website, it knows what you looked at last, or Netflix, it knows what you looked at last. We don't really think about that until we get mad and say, hey, I don't want them thinking about what I know. And everyone says, well, I don't want an Alexa.
Late.
Yeah, it's too late. I don't want an Alexa in my house because it hears everything I say. Well, how do you know Siri doesn't? That's with you all the time.
Yeah.
So
Thank you. So artificial intelligence, the importance of data, information in general, not just big data, Alexa, and cybersecurity, being secure and thinking about the ways we could be hacked or cracked, and then thinking about the ways we shouldn't be.
Yeah, if you're allowed for innovation, those have to go hand in hand.
Yeah.
And the aspect of being connected, we will be connected going forward unless you opt otherwise. And I think that's the future. With that, and thank you so much for this amazing discussion, I'm going to open up the floor for Q&A. There's microphones lined up at some of the aisles. So please, let's have some questions from the audience. We'd love to hear what you're thinking of and what you want to be answered. Please go ahead, sir.
We're a transaction-based industry, and obviously real estate transactions, whether they be transactions with tenants, transactions in the sale of a building, drive the industry. With the convergence of all this data, could you talk about the impact on transactions?
Anybody specific for the question, sir?
Any of the panelists.
Anybody who'd like to take that?
Yeah, I
Transactions.
mean, so you're talking about leasing transactions, buildings, all that, right? So I guess one thing, so I sat in a meeting the other day with our head of leasing and our head of our Boston region, and they're challenged with how to lease to these new entities. Right? So you talk about the nature of transaction, and they're bringing. I mean, Tommy talked about every lease. I know he gets involved with from a technology, but I don't get involved in every lease. That would be. I would be.
bigger nine.
But the nature of how they figure out how to package a building, reposition a building, bringing technology to attract the type of tenant that we're in the market trying to attract is a dynamic that's playing itself out. So I don't know whether I'm getting to your question. I mean, you could talk about like how we do transactions, and we were a very early adopter of VTS, and I can tell you that has fundamentally changed how data is transparent around the transaction flow. So our president, our CFO, or our CEO, I get a read. It's Monday morning, but tomorrow I'll have 35, 40 events from today. And I can then dictate how I spend my time in the most valuable transactions I need to spend time on. It has really transformed the interaction of our leadership. So I know there's two aspects there. So I hope I covered them. So
And in the process standpoint itself, imagine, you mentioned blockchain earlier, if we have fully trusted parties in a transaction and automatically executing digital contracts. I know we didn't talk about what that looks like, but it'll be the velocity will increase, the friction will decrease, and but there's a lot of work to be done along the way. So just on the process side.
I look at transactions as the financial and the physical. So from the financial side, every transaction is tracked. And if you're not taking payments online and be able to track it from start to finish, you're already behind the curve. From the data side of it, we look at every transaction and try and make it better for the next transaction. So we store all the historical data and analyze that data and make the next transaction better. And there are a lot of new software companies out there that are automating that process. And the more automated it gets, the smoother it will be. Because everyone knows from an LOI, from a tour to a lease could be a year. Sometimes it could be 5 years.
Yeah, it won't be that long.
Shrinking that, we have to.
And one of the things of VTS, we've actually pushed it out to our property management team. Because leasing never talks to property management, right? So
Or
it's actually
IT.
socialized. It's actually socialized. It's all transparent. It's really
Crowdsourced.
So,
We have another question over there, sir. Please go ahead.
Hi, can you share some thoughts on parking and evolving parking technology in terms of value creation and the overall tenant experience?
Parking's twofold: one today and two tomorrow. If you believe the technologist, parking tomorrow won't be an issue at all. Autonomous driving vehicles are going to remove parking entirely. If you look at parking today, the more cars you can get it in, the better it's going to be. The better the technology as a walk-up or how many spaces or spots you have available, the more cars you're going to be able to obviously put in your garage. As a whole, from a technology perspective, how I get involved in parking is if we put a parking automation system in or ventilation. And from a technology perspective, we've automated it to the most we can.
There is a category called Park Tech too.
Yes.
Park Tech, I know there's a whole parking. But how do you, we've done some gateless. How do you interact with your phone to do payments? But again, so that's all about that experience of how I interact with getting in and out quicker. So it's again,
Because there's an IoT element.
There's an IoT.
There's a
there's
hardware element
definitely
and
an
a
IoT
software
element.
and a fintech element.
Yep.
In Europe, they seem to have a different approach on some of the automated parking, where they have those underground chambers, if you will, and
Space.
Yeah,
It's
space,
all about
essentially,
space.
yeah.
We're building parking garages. Look around this city and you're seeing tons of parking garages. In Europe, it's a lot tighter, so they don't have that ability.
Yep.
But if you look at parking as a whole, again, I think where the industry's going with ride sharing and rental car, or not rental cars, zip cars and things like that, I think parking's becoming smaller. But there are some great innovations in technology. For the longest time, people wouldn't come to an urban environment because they didn't know where they could park. Now there are plenty of companies out there you can go to on your phone and say, I'm going to the Washington Monument, I want the closest parking spot. And they're tied to all the local parking companies, and they'll direct you through Waze or whatever right to the parking space, which has allowed a lot of non-urban people to take and go down into the urban environments because they were afraid to drive down there.
Yeah.
And there's some, we talk about autonomous mobility. There are various stages of that. I won't go into it, but what maybe one of the nearer stages is so I'm coming back to fracking. If you could frack the parking garage, we have Audi with automatic parking technology already in the car, so you get out of the car and it parks itself. But imagine if cars park themselves in that existing garage, how much real estate, lowercase r, how much real estate in the building is freed up because we're more optimally parking the cars.
Yeah.
So there are a bunch of different versions of how this might go down.
On the flip side, I'm thinking between cybersecurity and automated parking, if somebody ends up hacking this automated parking, smart parking system, can we have cars like roaming around neighborhoods on their own?
Well, that's not the parking system. That's the automation system in the car.
Yeah.
And that's already happened.
Okay.
Jeep, Chrysler got hacked when they had the Jeep platform where cars are driving down the road and people were turning them off.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't think that's really parking. I think that's
Anything's possible, right?
Yeah, what happened. I mean,
You got to balance the both. I mean, both
Yeah.
are going to have to move forward here.
but that's why we have cameras and other checks and balances.
Yep.
So if they take the car out of the garage, go ahead and take it. We're going to find you. What are you going to do with it?
I
Excellent.
think there's someone over here too on the far
There's
right.
let's take that question, and sir, I'll come back right to you. Sorry, I didn't notice you. Please go ahead.
This is a much better question over here, so thank you. A lot of the, by the way, thanks for coming up. This is great. For my opinion, a vast majority of it is really fun to talk about. But my question is really going to be based on a practical advice. Like, how do you actually get this stuff done? And I'll give you a point of reference, but my question is, how do you actually get this stuff implemented and put in buildings and stuff? So, point of reference, I'm in the Bay Area, worked for 6 institutional landlords over the last 20 years. I've sat and presented to owners of companies, executive committees, investment committees, and the problem is that an overwhelming percentage of commercial real estate is 3-5 year hold periods. Mm-hmm. So if you're trying to implement, and my hat's off to you at MIT with all these guys, smart guys trying to make money, but if they're trying to make money and if they want money from a landlord, it's going to go into a pro forma, it's going to impact the return, and it's going to drop the IRR from 14.3 to 12.4, and that will get rejected.
But that depends.
So anyway, I'll stop here.
Yeah.
But I want to hear your advice of how do you get this stuff from a practical point of view, how do you get this approved, put in when a vast majority of real estate is like that?
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, you guys can speak.
I'd start by saying it doesn't always cost more.
Yeah.
Yes, in theory it costs more, but in reality, if you can figure a way to save energy and pay for that cost, there is no additional cost. In a retrofit, it's a different story. And as the IRR, if I can show that the building is going to either A, lease faster, B, to a better client, or C, to someone who has better financials because it's a more intelligent building, maybe the IRR goes the other way. I mean, it could go either way. But you have to start with the problem. If every building in your area is low tech, it's hard. If every building in your area is high tech, someone in a low tech building is going to be forced to meet the surrounding area. It goes back to location, location, location. It's always hard to be the first because no one else has done it, no one else wants to do it, no one else wants to put their head in the guillotine. Someone's going to be first and someone's going to get it done. How we've gotten it done is we found the need. So in 2004, we put the first neutral host DAS in a building, a commercial office building. Oh, you can't do that. No one's going to pay for it. No one's going to pay for it. Okay, well, the building is 100% leased. Everyone wanted it. Now it's normal. Now everyone does it. But that was a $500,000 expenditure in a fully leased building. Did it make sense? No. Did it add the ability to keep the building 100% leased? Yes.
Now it makes sense, but the point is, it's tough to be the first mover on this stuff.
Absolutely, especially when it doesn't exist. And then as it pertains to new construction, I definitely tell you, in new construction, if you start it from the beginning and throw out the MEPs saying, I know this works, and show what it can be, it pays for itself, 100%.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no if, and, or but about it. You have to get in at the early stages of the building, either the build out, the construction, or the remodeling. Otherwise, it does become very tough.
And Tommy and I have a benefit. We're long-term owners, right? So I don't necessarily, but I can tell that the dynamic of how space is being changed. We talk about great place, great space, and how it represents our client. I mean, so you start at 1,000-foot level, how it reflects the ability of our occupants to represent their brand, to create collaborative space. Sustainability is part of a message. So the type of tenants that we're trying to attract is all part of this approach, and then the ability to create a community of amenities that, again, people want to work at and create. So we start at a high level and you work down, and those have technology investment implications because of the type of environments you're trying to create. So I'm not answering your question. I don't know if I can help you on the short-term look, but there's clearly drivers and dynamics in the space and how we're trying to attract and operate at the top of the market that it's part of all our discussions now. So anyway,
I would add to that. Remember where we were with sustainability and LEED about 10 or 15 years ago. It was really hard to justify the additional cost, especially when at the time that technology was expensive. Costs have come down a lot. And eventually, and some of the work was done at MIT to determine that sustainable buildings or green buildings, depending upon how you define them, now command anywhere from 8 to 15% premium on transactions. Mm-hmm. We couldn't do that until we had data. So it's going to take some pioneers in the beginning to do it. And then some anecdotal and some both quantitative and qualitative data and a good PhD or master's thesis on, yes, there is a financial reward to doing some of these things. So it's hard. It's hard. And we're early.
And I'd say if you really want to pick one, just pick one thing.
Yeah.
Pick any one of the topics, HVAC control, building automation system, lighting, any one of them, prove it to the ownership that it does work, and then how can they tell you no the next time? They work off of each other.
Yeah, that's great. Do one thing.
One, not all.
Prove it once.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. Let's go on to another question over there. And we have space for one more question after this, but real quick, if you can line up, please. Thank you. Please go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Basic question. We see it's an emerging technology, and I think there's a challenge between the building owners and the people manufacturing products. Is there a forum out there today that just talks about how we can communicate challenges in buildings, manufacturers creating product? Is there a platform where they have a place to speak that?
Yeah.
Share with the audience?
I mean, the closest thing that I have found is really Realcomm that happened 2 weeks ago. And it is. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have everyone at the table there, but for a lot of the many players are there. And they do. The integrators have a pre-conference, and there's the CIOs have a pre-conference. There's 200 of my peers. That's a de facto meeting of my peer group in the industry, right? So I don't know whether Tommy, you've seen any others, but I just don't see forums where you're interacting on the provide. I don't see it here.
I've heard BOMA is going to start one. We were up in Boston.
What was that too?
Not that long ago with the executive session of BOMA, and I believe they are going to start one. But I would tell you the best place to look. It's going to sound funny, but Google. I mean, it goes back to my comment earlier. If you have one bad experience at a restaurant, you're going to tell everybody, and everyone's putting it on Google.
We have a couple of more minutes. Sir, you have a question over there on this aisle, I think. Do you have one over there, ma'am? Please go ahead.
Just what we're all wondering about is there an enterprise solution for all of this that you know of yet, or someone that's working on to bring it all together?
Enterprise solution to bring everything together?
Yeah, right.
That's a tough
No.
No.
Yeah. No. I mean, the short answer is no. Some of the legacy companies are trying to. We're seeing some of the legacy companies making acquisitions, doing startups in-house, trying to maybe be that solution. As I mentioned, there's this convergence. I don't know though. We've gotten so used to these devices that have a bunch of point solutions. We're pretty comfortable with having a bunch of point solutions. Now, that doesn't solve all problems. So, what do you think? We'll end up with a hybrid?
I think if there was one, I would be scared of them. Yeah. Because the control that they would garner over you, it goes back to building automation systems. 5 years ago, they weren't standardized. Now they're all BACnet or whatever compliant. Yeah. If one person controlled the kingdom, I might be a little scared of it.
I think it's also.
And I do think there's a control environment, controlling your building, and there's like a data or enterprise kind of running your building, and that could bridge into, there's connections between those two.
And then there's a transaction.
But there's no one solution that would.
And I think for this reason, it's the era of partnerships that will facilitate these positive outcomes. So more than ever, and we've spoken about this, partnerships are really paving the way for builders to come together, with technology companies to come together, with so many different elements. So that's the new, I think, wave of change fueled by partnerships. Thank you, ma'am. I'm going to take the last question here, sir. You've got your time right there.
Thank you. Just quickly, I should put a plug in. BOMA has launched a technology committee, and the inaugural session is tomorrow at 1 p.m. So check the app if anyone. It's an open session, so it'd be great to get more people out to that. But my question is back to the cost side of things, and with tenants expecting this type of connectivity in buildings, et cetera, is it not being passed through as a recoverable operating expense? I'm curious about that with Boston Properties.
So connectivity in buildings doesn't cost the ownership anything. It doesn't. How you want to deliver into the building costs money. So if I want 30 providers to come into my building, AT&T, Verizon, L3, Cogent, Comcast, anybody else you can think of, you as a building owner shouldn't pay a nickel for that.
No, but all of that new, the Wi-Fi, the connectivity of building automation systems, all of those different layers. In fact, you added that there's you have a full-time data person. Do you recover that?
Yeah, no, that's really a focus on a corporate level. And on the building side, our Wi-Fi, I've got over 200 access points now that are servicing cafes to open spaces, to collaborative spaces, to outdoor spaces. That's all building costs. That's pretty nominal, though. That's right. When you start moving up into DAS. Tommy made a commitment. We've been able to execute 31 million square feet of coverage with DAS, but nothing paid by Boston Properties. We've been very, very fortunate with a program over the last 7 years that we've done. But that's unheard. That's very
spot on, though. If you have a lead client with 100,000 square foot in it and have 4,000 mobile devices, you as the building owner can go to the provider and say, I have a client or tenant in my building, I need a DAS put in, and I guarantee you, I'll give you my card.
They'll show up.
They will show up and put it in. Because if not, and I've seen it happen, where 4,000 devices switch from Verizon to AT&T. Right. AT&T put it in.
But the dynamics are changing. The technology and the economics are changing with all of that right now.
Very true.
The only place I'm signing deals right now is in DC. So.
That's because DC doesn't have coverage. But as it pertains to Wi-Fi, it goes both ways. So as the building amenity space, as a common area expense, yes, it pushes through, it passes back, doesn't cost us money. We push that back to the clients of the building.
So with that, thank you so much, sir. We're out of time. I thank everybody for this amazing panel, and thank you so much. I hope the next couple of days are amazing for everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you
so much.
Okay. Always good fun.
Wow, what a terrific technology discussion. One more round of applause for our panel.